Welcome to Improv Your Parenting, the art of turning parenting into play. Today, we're joined by Alan Hawkins. Alan is an improviser from Los Angeles and Chicago who has been performing, directing, and teaching theater and improv since 2004. He's a graduate of the Second City Conservatory, the Second City Musical Conservatory, the I.O. West program, the Chicago Comedy Sports Training Center, and the Annoyance program. Alan has participated in many festivals across the U.S. and was an instructor and director for the Teen Comedy Festival in Chicago. He is an ensemble member of Unexpected Productions, the longest-running sports theater in America, and the author of the book, You Can't Learn Improv from a Book. You can find Alan's work at www.alanhawkinsimprov.com, and you can find his book at Amazon. Alan Hawkins, thank you so much for joining us on Improv Your Parenting. I really want to just start off here by asking you, what is your interaction with kids, and how does improv play a role in that interaction?
Okay. It's great to be here with you, Jeremy. So I am a parent. I have two daughters who are 11 and 13. And then I also teach teen improv with the Hogan Cup here in Seattle. And then before that, I was a regular teacher and coach for the Teen Comedy Festival in Chicago. And then I've taught high school improv since 2004 for a number of high schools across most of the West. And then I also the artistic director of the teen program at Second City in Chicago, and I co-directed a teen sketch group for a while as well. And I wrote a book about teaching teens improv.
Wow. So you literally wrote the book on the topic.
And I have it sitting next to me. So
perfect.
You can't learn improv from a book.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So let me start then with, it sounds like you did a lot of the teaching even before you had kids.
Yes.
How did having done that teaching come to the fore in terms of when you had kids, allowing you to use that improv with your kids? And when did you start realizing, oh, this is what I'm doing? Or did you do it with an intent?
We did intend to have kids.
Yes.
So, well, actually, my wife has a plan, and I was made vaguely aware of the plan.
That seems fair.
So yeah, and I'm fine. You know, I always wanted to be a parent. I just wanted to. I'm a Gen Xer, so I had my kids late in life, and the reason being is I wanted to make sure that I could provide the life that I didn't have for my kids. So the original question was, how did teaching teens improv change me as a parent or affect me as a parent? And that's an interesting and great question. The thing about teens, though, is that a teen is so much different than a baby or a toddler or a young kid, because teaching teens is something where you have to be a bit of a subversive to make it work.
Ooh, tell me about that.
So you can't give a teenager a lesson.
No,
they are not going to go for it. Yeah. And what I figured out, I started teaching teens when I was in the conservatory at Second City. So I was learning I'd gotten into the conservatory as an actor. I hadn't really done a lot of improv before. So I was learning the art of improv in the Second City Conservatory. And then one of my friends in Fresno, where I was living, I was driving back and forth from Fresno to Los Angeles, invited me to teach some of the stuff that I had learned to his teenagers at his drama classes. And so he would have me twice a week. So I'd learn on Sunday, and then I would teach teens twice a week what I had learned the week before. And I did the entire conservatory like that. I'll tell you something, learning something and then the next day teaching it to somebody else is the most insane game of telephone that you can play. And what I learned year by year was that I would see the same kids as they moved through these programs, through these high schools, and they wouldn't retain. I was like, they'd be like, oh, you, the funny guy, I like you. Oh, I had fun with you last year. Great. What do you remember? And they're just like, comedy. They don't remember any of the yes and stuff, any of the lessons that that I had taught them, what they remembered was they had fun. And so in talking to my friend Randy, who was the one who really got me into teaching teens, he's like, these kids, their lives are full of lessons. Everything is a lesson, and everyone wants to teach them. And you're just adding more noise. Like they have fun, and your yes and lessons are great. But if you really want to make an impact, if you really want to make a positive change, give them experiences. That's how they learn. He goes, the lessons they just have too much. And so then I started figuring out how to get people to improvise without saying yes and, or saying, this exercise, we're going to do this. And it really kind of changed the way that I teach teens improv. And the reason I say all of this gobbledygook word salad is all my experience for teaching teens didn't help me as a father of a toddler or a kid. I'll say somebody that's fifth grade and below. What helped me in being a parent goes actually the opposite way. It goes back more towards the Viola Spolin stuff and the kind of structured play. So I was the stay-at-home dad for both kids. So, I am so fortunate to have had that experience because I got to be the one that learned to play, with them. And I have this compulsive thing where I just buy little instruments and noisemakers whenever I find them. If I see a harmonica for sale somewhere and it's brand new in the packaging, I'll grab it and throw it in a box somewhere, or any type of bells and jingles. So we always had those around the house. And if somebody grabbed one and they looked at me like, hey, I want to play, I'd be like, great. I'd go grab a whole bunch of them and we would figure out what music we could make together. And it's being ready to engage in, hey, this is what I want to play with, which is like your scene partner is, I always say the game of the scene is the thing that you first have fun with and everyone decides to join in. That's when you find the game of the scene. And that's how my kids would play. They'd be like, hey, I'm having fun with this thing. Do you want to join? I'm like, yeah, great. And then also realizing when you're not needed. And I think as an improviser, that's a professional improviser, somebody who is like top tier player, they know when they are not needed on stage. They can look at a scene and go, no, I'm not needed out there. Anything that I add is going to be noise. And that's a smart player. And I would look at my kids and my kids would be exploring something and they'd be very focused and intent. And my first inclination as a parent would be like, oh, I can show them these 9 other things that are related to that. I would distract and take away from that moment. And knowing that I'm not needed right there in that state of play is an important lesson that I got from improv.
You said something on both sides of a single issue that I want to kind of pull on a little bit.
Okay.
And that is that on one side of it, it was seeing what they're doing and understanding, could I engage them? And then on the flip side was, should I? Or, am I useful in this engagement?
Yeah.
And one of the great things about that I recognized was neither one of those were about what you want.
Right.
And so I'd love to explore the recognizing that it's not about you, but it's about them in terms of the interaction. Can you talk a little bit about how or when, or even if you recognize that that's what you were doing? Well,
yeah. And it kind of goes to the kind of the director that I am. Like I said, I was an actor before I was an improviser, and I was a director before I was an improviser. And I'm also I was a stage manager first, and then I became a director, which is the worst kind of director because no actor likes to work with a stage manager that becomes a director. too obnoxious. But as a director, I realized a long time ago, if you can't give an actor a note and explain how it helps them implicitly, you do not have the expertise to give that note. It doesn't mean the note is wrong. It doesn't mean that actor shouldn't hear it. But if you can't be the lens that furthers them on that journey, you are not the person to give that note.
Okay.
And I take that into improv as well, almost more in improv, where it's like if I'm directing a team and I'm coaching them and I'm looking and I'm seeing where someone is focused, if I can't come up with a plan that will, or someone is struggling, if I can't come up with a focused plan that makes sense to them, that I think will really help them become the improviser that they want to be. If I can't do that, I don't want to give that note. I don't want to be the person that holds them back. And I do the same thing with my kids. I want to be the parent that not only plays, but I also want to be the parent that guides them to the safe place as an adult, as the adults that they want to be. So if, like you said, those things weren't about me. I want to play and have fun, but if I impose myself on my kids, then I'm no better than my dad that when I was a teenager, he would make me listen to the Rolling Stones and Creedence Clearwater Revival.
Whether you want it to or not. Yeah.
Right. And it's not that those are that's bad music. I recognize it as good, but I, as a kid, wanted to listen to Van Halen and Montrose and things like that. Yeah. I didn't want to hear Peter, Paul, and Mary or the Kingston Trio.
So you brought up your priority as a parent was to enable them and to sort of help them create a safe who they are. And you brought up your experience as a kid. Did you do much play as a kid with your family, with your parents at all?
No. My family, and this probably the reason I got into theater. My family was not very affectionate. They didn't, I can't tell you more than maybe 3 times in my life that my mom hugged me, and it's not that they were bad people. It's just that's the people that they were. They weren't touchy-feely people. I was like the girl in the Munsters who was the one normal one that everybody thought was weird, where I was just like, I just need affection, and
every other human being. Yeah.
Yeah. And me as a kid playing was, because my family moved around so much, it was often my little brother is Down syndrome. So it was just he and I would play together, and he didn't communicate. So, we had to be really, you had to be really creative. The kind of play that we would have is he liked watching black belt theater, and then we would act out black belt theater afterwards. So he would do his version of Kung Fu, and I would do mine. We wouldn't hurt each other or anything, mostly going around making the poses and hi-ya sounds. But I didn't get, that was the only kind of play that I got when I was a kid. A lot of my play was just me by myself. I would draw a lot. I was that kid. I would sit in the corner and draw or read,
And so when you were starting to become a parent, did you define, so my priority is going to be what you had just laid out? Or did you sort of kind of evolve into that as your parenting journey sort of flourished?
I definitely evolved. It was a growth thing. I was super excited because I've always wanted to be a dad. I was super nervous about messing up. You hope that you're not making your kid into that kid that posts memes about their mental health for the rest of their lives. But I probably am a little bit. But yeah, I was super excited. And it was the thing that, and my other improviser friends who were becoming parents were discovering the same thing, that it was fun to be a parent because of improv, because that state of play was something that you recognized and brought into your relationship with your kids. Yeah. And I was so much more jazzed by it because I didn't get that myself. And it felt natural to want that, So it became more, I never got tired of spending time with my kids.
Mm.
And I still don't.
Yeah. Can you give me some examples of when you get to play with your kids, what that looks like, how you play?
Well, right now they're teens, so they're changing, and my youngest, pretty much everything I do is cringe.
Yes.
Right now.
I hear that a lot too. Yeah.
Yeah. It's amazing how much that word gets said in my house. And it's like, cringe, really? I pay your rent. Like, I think you can pick a new word. But, and then my oldest is her and I are doing bass lessons. She's doing bass lessons. I'm doing guitar lessons at the same time. We do that every Tuesday. So we have a built-in night that we get to have. We get to talk and do something fun together. And but she's very much into Gen X. Unfortunately, her idea of Gen X and my reality of growing up Gen X are a little different. Like, she just thinks Gen X is we were so cool. We were just so cool. We were just, everything was just like something that we'd sneer at, and we just had sarcastic attitudes. And I'm just kind of like, I don't know. I just remember going to work a lot.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, I don't know if I was cool. I was pretty much upset with the situation of the world, and I had to go to work.
Exactly.
And maybe the sarcasm came from that. But I see that you see it now as an identity. Okay. But when me and the kids were younger, some of my favorite things were like just the ideas that my kids would come up with. One of the things I remember vividly, and it's that kid's imagination. When Chris Cornell died, it affected me a lot. Mm-hmm. And the news, my wife and I were getting the kids ready for school. We were both getting ready for work. I think Sawyer was like 4 at the time. And I was struggling. Like, that one really hit me a lot, because he was just genuinely somebody that I looked up to and just thought was the most just nice guy. Like, nothing about this guy was like, oh, Chris Cornell, you don't want to hang out with that guy. No, it really felt like he was generally the nicest person. So it hit me a lot. And Sawyer walks up and she goes, "Daddy, are you sad?" And I'm like, "Yeah, baby, I'm sad." And I'm almost crying. Like, I could tell that she could tell. And she holds up this fluffy white unicorn with a purple mane. And she goes, "My unicorn's name is Tuna."
How'd you respond to that?
I couldn't stop laughing. That was the greatest statement ever. And then for the rest of the day, all I could think about was this magical unicorn that was fluffy with a purple mane named Tuna. You know, and it's that kind of moment that you connect with your kids. Or they would Sawyer would set up. We gave her a little tent castle from IKEA that was a castle, and then her and I would set up an entire fort built around the castle with it in its front, and she would be the princess, and then I would be the dragon, or I could be the king, and we would do that until she wanted to do something else, which usually is about 30 or 40 minutes, and then she'd want to change she'd want to put on Moana or something. But it's just that pretend time. And that ability of, when you're in an improv scene and somebody makes the initiation that everybody's cats, and instead of being cats that don't talk, we decide to be cats that talk about the geopolitical situation of the world, whatever that scene ends us. But that's the rules of that world, is we're cats. We talk about politics and we're kind of snooty about it.
Well,
and that's the world that lives in.
Yeah.
And because I know how to do that, when my kids want to establish a similar world, I'm like, oh, okay, this is the world we live in. And I'm ready to live in that world and just experience it, and not be the adult of let's get your mousetrap game out and play that instead.
How boring would that be as compared to it? Yeah. I mean, exploring that creativity, that imagination, and letting them, sounds like you let them lead.
Yes.
In terms of creating that space, that environment.
Well, and that's kind of what improv is too, is letting your scene partner, what are they going to do? And what can you do to amplify that? and hopefully they're doing the same thing. And if we're both doing it, then wow, what world are we creating?
Yeah. Have your kids, now that you've done that for, it sounds like, their lives, have they been able to use that in their experiences to help them in any way that doesn't involve you?
Yes, I made weird kids. I think when they want to be imaginative now, and now they're teens and their friends don't do it, I think I've made weird kids a little bit, because they're just kind of like, oh, you don't want to play imagination right now? Which maybe high school is going to be hard, but I maybe I made a couple of Kurt Vonnegut's out of something. Yeah. So I may have made weird kids. I know my wife, who is not an actor or an improviser, there's a lot of times where she's just like, that's you guys. That's a you guys thing. I'm not, whatever. I'm not playing with that.
Well, that's actually a really interesting question, is how does your wife experience that, and what does she do when they offer it?
So my wife she is not an actor. She's a medical professional, very scientific mind, but she has seen well over 300 improv shows in her life, so she's actually very knowledgeable about the art form. What I love is my youngest will be doing something and I'll hear her say, I made a mistake. And I'll hear my wife go, there are no mistakes. That's a gift. But she's, but that's her way of saying, hey, no, don't stop what you're doing. Keep going forward and see where it leads you. And she understands that concept. So there is a lot about improv that she even uses. She definitely understands all the concepts and knows, how the kids have grown up and what they're going to respond to. So she will use some of those things. And my wife is such a great parent. She's the smartest parent that I know. And she's taught me a lot about what it means to be a parent, because while I'm the improviser and I want to be the fun parent that is ready to play, she's also the parent who's like, yeah, we need to have college funds for them.
She keeps it organized.
Yeah. And a lot of times I'll miss a cue that something isn't going well, and my wife is the one who'll be like, hey, Baldylocks, this is happening. Why don't you go check in with your kid?
Wow. Okay, good. Yeah. So it's a team effort.
It is. And our differences make each other stronger. And I know a lot of my friends who are parents where both parts of the couple are improvisers. So I'm sure their experience is a little bit different than mine. But I do think that my wife yes-ands in very generous ways, even though she's not an improviser.
And it sounds like, too, is that she's very aware of what's going on in the environment, in the interactions. And so she's tracking across that. So she's staying in that moment and having that awareness. And it also sounds like that she is able to then communicate with you in ways where you can do what needs to be done together with whoever is able to do that thing.
She gives good notes, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, it's interesting in terms of the work I'm trying to do with how to help parents use improv in their interaction with kids.
Yes.
Is not every parent is going to be the playful, jovial, like, hey, let's just, have the games. Some of the parents are going to be, it sounds like your wife, where it's, what are the things that they can do in those interactions? Where can they offer these lessons as well in the way that makes sense for them?
Yeah. And then how can you support your partner, just like your scene partner, in that effort?
Yes.
What is the most constructive thing without inserting yourself so much that you take away from their ability to be the parent at that moment?
Exactly.
And it's really this thing of remember the squishy balls when you'd squish them and like a whole bunch of it would come out in different places. It's we're all constantly squishing the ball, and the things that are important are coming out for that moment, and we're not fighting it and pushing it back. We just sometimes relax the ball and it goes back into its shape until we squeeze it again. And that's that partnership and that play of scene partners. and your marital partner and your partnership with your kids is, giving that ball a squeeze, and the important things come out and we recognize them. And then when we're done with that, we relax the ball and it goes back to its shape.
Wow. So it's almost as if the family is a team.
It should be. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what you want.
And everybody's working for the, how do we make this work? Yeah. Yeah. I like that mentality. So when doesn't it work? Where have you had blow ups or things where it's just like, damn, we didn't hit that mark?
I have to say it's been pretty successful so far. I'm trying to think of any stumbles. I can't think, and this is one of those things of like, I've been a perfect parent. That person who says that is never a perfect parent.
I've never had a problem. Yeah.
They're the people that are around them talk about them being parents and how bad it is. So I don't want to say that.
No.
But I'm starting to see the adults that my kids are growing into,
mm-hmm.
and I'm excited by them. I'm not worried about them making it in the world. I'm not worried about them driving. I'm worried about all the people who drive around them. And that's a really great place to be when you can say, I trust my kids to make good decisions.
Yeah.
I don't trust their friends at all. But I trust
you got to make
them.
sure they're the drivers.
Yeah, exactly. And where has it not worked? It's not that there's been moments where it's not worked. There have been moments when it's more difficult. Like you can't use a lot of improv exercises when your children are dealing with grief.
Oh, really? Okay. So can you talk about that a little bit? How you dealt with grief?
My mom passed away unexpectedly. I mean, it took 2 weeks, but we were not prepared.
Mm-hmm.
She passed away November of 2023, and none of us handled it well. And it was like if stage 4 cancer is bad, then she had stage 7. It took her down savagely. And I got to watch it real time. But, going back and checking in with the kids, that's not the time where you can be like, let's have some fun. That all goes out the window. The only thing that remains is listening to what they're feeling, which is exactly what you're feeling that you don't know how to deal with.
Yeah.
There's not a yes and to this. There's only yes. And you just have to, something horrible and depressing that comes out of your kids' mouths, you just have to say yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we're experiencing this. Yes, we recognize this.
Those feelings are real. And yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. One of the things that Dave Rosowski teaches that I use every time I'm on stage is don't let the big things pass you by. And what he means is if you see a scene and one of the players says, I want a divorce, and then the other guy still just keeps going and talking about spaghetti, we missed something. And the whole audience saw it and said, I would not have let that go by. Yeah. So you have to recognize that's a big thing, and we need to stop and we need to address only that. Even if it stops the scene dead, that big thing is all that's important. And that's the mode that you end up going into as a parent when your kids are dealing with grief. This is all that we're dealing with, and we need to listen.
Yeah. So the play isn't what you go to there, but the listening, the being in that moment, those are still lessons from improv that you can use to apply in that kind of situation, right? Yeah. And so, it's as if you're saying, okay, it's not always about the fun, the laughs. It's about the presence. Yeah.
Yeah. And knowing when to shut up, and not inserting yourself into what the other person is feeling, these are just life lessons. This is any relationship. You can use this idea. if you're at work, you can use this idea with your partner, is, if somebody is saying something important, you need to stop and listen. And that's all we need to address. And if you're like me, I'm that stupid person that can't help but relate their own experiences after somebody tells their own only, and it's my way of saying, oh, I understand what you're going through. Here's my similar thing, so I can say we're on the same thing. But that doesn't ever come across well. So you have to go, shut up, listen. What things can you say that will encourage them to explore what's happening instead of inserting yourself?
Yeah. I was going to say that's a lesson I really need to learn, but I'm trying not to insert myself right now.
You're not alone. You're not alone.
I do the same thing. I'm like, oh yeah, well that, so I've gone through that too. So yeah, we're in the same boat. No, you're right. People hate that. And I've dealt with that so much in my life where they're like, yeah, I'm an asshole. I'm like, oh, you know what? I realize I am.
Yeah, you're not trying to play no but it ends up being no but. So yeah, so the times that improv has not necessarily not worked, but has been harder, has been the real things. But it still helps, the listening helps.
Yeah.
The getting to what's the honesty of the moment and what's really going on and addressing only that. Mm-hmm. So though even in those times it helps. Not easy. It's just horrible. It doesn't feel good. And even after a year, we still have days that we're struggling with it.
Yeah. It seems like that kind of thing will be with you for some time, maybe forever. And what is fascinating about that is that being in that moment, that listening, that giving the space and not trying to occupy it is all stuff that you've learned to do for various aspects of life that are applicable here. Yeah. And that gets to one of the key points I would love people to be able to take away from this work that I'm trying to interview people and learn about, is that it's not just about how you interact with your kids, although that is a huge component of what I'm trying to push, but it's about who you are as a person and how you interact with the world in anything that happens, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's a great reason that corporations hire improvisers to train their executives. It's because without that training, everything becomes very insular and uncreative. And they recognize that creativity and innovation are married at the DNA level.
Yes.
And if you stifle creativity, you will never have innovation, which can be applied to kids too, where you have to foster in them the ability to be creative, or they're not going to be fully rounded people.
And then they won't be able to deal with whatever they're going to face in their lives and whatever world they encounter.
Yeah.
We're coming up to kind of the end of our time. So I want to ask you one last question, if I can.
Yes, of course.
And that is, you mentioned that when you learned you were going to be a dad, you were sort of like, crap, what do I do with this? How do I don't want to screw this up. If you were talking to somebody who is becoming a parent for the first time, what, based on your experience of being able to be in that moment, do that listening, meet the kid where the kid is and what they need, not step into their space and everything else we've talked about, what would you tell that parent as sort of, maybe here's a mindset that will help you, or here's a first step that will help you? What would you say to them?
That's a non-improviser.
Yeah. Let's assume they're not an improviser.
Let's say it's just a regular person off the street.
Yeah.
Everything your kid says is exactly what your heart needed to hear.
Ooh,
no matter what.
Tell me more on that.
Good or bad. Yeah, that's a concept that I got from Susan Messing that I will always thank her for. Mm-hmm. And the way she said it is, the last thing you heard is exactly what you needed to hear. I just added the heart part, because when you're dealing with kids, it's your heart that is involved more than anything else. Even when you're mad, it's because your heart hurts, not because your head hurts.
Yeah.
So it's everything your kid says is exactly what your heart needs to hear, good or bad. And dealing with that, be it play or be, crying or hurt feelings, dealing with that is best handled in small incremental steps. We don't play the entire story in one scene. We explore little parts of it when we're doing it. And if you handle kids as trying to do the big scene, they're going to get swept away. But if you're a parent, if you're just dealing with your kid on small things at a time instead of big things. And I say this with the exception that there are kids out there who have other outlining things like, they might be on the spectrum. They might have difficulty dealing with touch, so there is going to be circumstances that will make it hard to handle just the small things at a time because there's so many small things.
Yeah.
But if possible, small things are the best way to play or to be a good parent is, let's win the battles, not the war.
Yeah. And I think too is that what might seem like a small thing to the parent is the biggest thing to that kid in that moment.
Yeah, you're a parent, so that, a toy that you haven't seen your kid play with for 3 months suddenly breaks, and it's the end of the world. That's not them being silly. That's because they discovered something again that they love and it broke and it hurts.
It hurts.
And you have to look at it from that point of view, not stand there and go, you haven't even touched that thing for 3 months. Why do you care?
Yeah. Yeah. So seeing it from their perspective is a very powerful way to interact.
Yeah. And they're super honest about their feelings. They're not like us. What they're feeling is exactly what they're feeling. And they're not being silly. They're not being overly dramatic. It's just the way their heart is telling them they feel.
Yeah. And so if you listen to that, that's what your heart needed to hear.
Yeah. And that's the level that you need to handle this situation is just what's going on in this moment. And maybe you can't solve the problem. That's the other thing that improv has taught me as a parent. We don't solve problems on stage because every time we solve a problem, we have to start over again.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I always say, if the house is on fire, go get gasoline.
Play with the fire.
Let's see how big we can make this thing go. Because if we put out the fire, our reason to be here is over. The things that are important to them need to be just as important to you.
Yeah.
I think is if I were to sum that up.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think that's sage advice. And if I was a new parent, I would have very little idea of how to implement that right away, but I would play with it as I learned to interact with my kid.
So if I can add this, you drive a car, right?
Yeah.
You don't think about the laws all the time when you're driving. You listen to Tom Petty and the windows are down and you're just enjoying it. But you know what? When the light turns yellow, you need to slow down. The things that you might not know how to implement, as long as they're in your head, you might implement them at the most important time.
Yes. And we never know when we're going to need what we know or when we're going to know what we need.
That needs to be on a t-shirt, my friend. Just the entire block of text, black t-shirt, white, nice Helvetica font, clearly read. Put it on Amazon. I'll buy it tomorrow. I need an extra large.
Awesome. Well, Alan, this has been a wonderful conversation. And, it's funny is I have this list of questions and I didn't do like 90% of them, which is glorious because that means one day I'll be able to talk to you again and get you back and get to some more of this stuff. There's so much wisdom here. There's so much experience and there's so much value. One of the things I'd love to in the future talk more about is the interacting with teens and going into that space a lot more. So I already know what our next conversation is at least going to start with. But thank you so much.
I'm ready when you are.
Love it.